The Bruins continue to add in the portal. They got a new big-time running back. They got even more special teams help, all coming on the way. Locked On UCLA. Let's hit it, baby.
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey everybody, it's Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer. Thanks for tuning in to this edition of Locked On UCLA. Thanks for making it your first listen each and every day. It's free wherever you get your podcast, and it's available on YouTube. So thanks for subscribing and your support. Diehard Bruins fan here and a D1 play-by-play broadcaster. The road life continues, but not for the Bruins, who head back home basketball-wise. We'll get to that in a moment, previewing UCLA-SC men's basketball. But first, Chip Kelly and the Bruins continue to have the recruiting boom of the fall into winter of 22 into the early stages of January in 2023. UCLA, one, gets a big running back transfer, and then two guys filling in some special teams roles. One, Carson Steele. You look at his numbers, big numbers ending the regular season for a Ball State team who went 5-7, did not play in a bowl game. So if you take the looks of a Carson Steele in his regular season numbers, this is a guy that had the sixth ranked rushing yards in terms of the country, had 14 touchdowns on the ground before all the bowl games happened. Now he's back down to number 9 in rushing yards across the country. But this is a guy who UCLA went and got and continues to fill out the running backs room for Chip Kelly, adding to Anthony Adkins and what could be a rising star in TJ Harden, giving UCLA 3 potentially good options. One in Harden, who's already produced for the Bruins last couple of games. You have Atkins, who can be that big, more bruising style back, one would assume, coming from Army, from a triple option system that might fit more the role of Britton Brown from years past. And then you have Blonde Lightning with the long locks, and the likes of Carson Steele coming over, who is an all-MAC first-teamer coming through, was an offensive MVP for Ball State, pretty much did a lot, and was almost entirely, at some point of their games, the entire offense for a Ball State program. So UCLA adds to the portal and continues to build their running back room. Again, Zach Charbonnet has not officially declared for the draft yet, although with him not playing in the Sun Bowl, it's all pretty much said and done, barring something dramatically crazy, maybe like one might say if Dante Moore flipping from Oregon to UCLA. But no, let's not even think about that. You have Harden, who UCLA has, who in his last 2 games did TJ 200 yards rushing at Cal and versus Pitt, giving him about 100 yards per game on average on the ground, averaging about 8.5 yards per carry, if not better, with 1 touchdown. One game where Charbonnet did play, and then mind you, he had 89 yards on 11 carries. And then in the game where Charbonnet did not play against Pitt in the bowl game, Harden continued to do big things on the ground for the Bruins against the Pitt Panthers. You could argue it was against Cal, against a lot of second stringers against Pitt, but still the Bruins went in there, and you had Harden, who's done good things offensively. Adkins hasn't played in a year, didn't play in 22. It'll be almost 2 years in between games, close to it for Adkins, but had some good, big highlight reel tape from Army, including that 71-yard run. And then you have Carson Steele, whose numbers speak for themselves, had 9 games where he had over 100 yards, 3 games where he had 180 yards plus, and 3 games where he had 3 touchdowns rushing in a game. Although against Tennessee, he could barely muster 27 yards. In the season opener for Ball State, had double-digit carries and could only get 27 yards in the game, against the Tennessee team, who proved they're one of the better teams in the country when fully healthy. So one wonders, is Steele, and was it the line issue? One would assume with UCLA going after him, getting him to come over from the state of Indiana, out-recruiting him compared to him going to Purdue. UCLA got some talent in the running back room. So it's good to see Steele adds to the depth for UCLA, which is going to have quite the camp going into next year. You're looking at some guys who are battling for offensive line spots, especially some key battles in the quarterback positions. Again, Ethan Garbers has not said anything about staying or leaving UCLA. Already a Washington transfer coming to the Bruins. So he had a good game, had a good last drive, one could say, against Pitt. You could have either Justin Martin compete. You could have the likes of Colin Schlee and then Dante Moore. So there's 3, if not maybe 4 quarterbacks who could try and win a job in 23. Well, some might say the odds-on favorite would be Dante Moore. And then you have a running back room that's got TJ Harden, who could be an incumbent. Keegan Jones still has time, and he's arguably with the guy who was rated number 2 in the depth chart before Harden heading into the bowl game. That's a guy that could compete. Now you have Steele, you have Adkins. So UCLA, again, is building the weapons from the portal, getting some recruits, all to try and get themselves a competitive unit offensively, which one would assume under Chip Kelly. But with Mo Osling III declaring for the draft, you have Stephon Blaylock as well and Raekwon O'Neal. You have two of those three being defensive guys. Can UCLA hit the portal and find any late defensive recruits? I know there's the kid from Gardena Sarah UCLA's trying to hit up. He's a 4-star DB. Can the Bruins get him? But again, the offense is looking to shape up. We don't know who the big figureheads will be just yet. But again, the QB battle should be intense. We'll see who transfers out or who doesn't heading into the fall part and into summer camp. And then the running back room looking pretty impressive. Yes, Charbonnet was fun. Zach Charbonnet and Britton Brown was especially fun. Josh Kelly, again, this is a Chip Kelly coach who he's won in the portal, especially at the running back position. And you could think maybe Steele's that guy who's number 1. Will it be an Adkins? Will it be a three-headed monster? Do you have the guy who has the short yardage to get? You have the main back, whatever it is. You want depth at the running back position, and UCLA is building it. Now, as I've been teasing, UCLA gets special teams help. You have Blake Lesser, the Montana State transfer, who in his career is 44 or 45 from field goals, made 71 of 73 PATs this year. So not exactly fully automatic, but close to it, as he fills the role of the kicking position that is left open by Barmira hitting the portal after walking on senior day. So UCLA gets Blake Lester, Montana State. They're a team who is amongst the top 4 teams in the FCS. Most importantly, one might want to know this when it comes to kickoffs for Blake Glessner, a guy who has a couple of 50-yarders this year. Kickoffs, though, he led the FCS in touchbacks in kickoffs. So in terms of negating the opposition's kickoff return, you have a guy who can blast it through the back of the end zone with a big leg. So maybe in big moments, might have a bigger leg than Barmira, could blast it through the back of the end zone. Or maybe in a windy day, like how Pitt did, their kicker went through a bunch of big kicks in the wind and was able to blast it through the back of the end zone, as we saw UCLA, or other than the 2 fumbles from the Bruins in the return game, made those kicks in the wind. Glessner has dealt with the elements. Of course, 1 year in the Pac-12 and then one more first last year will be the first year in the Big Ten. It's a guy who's dealt with the elements. In Bozeman, it gets really cold. In Montana, it gets really cold. I would know. I've been there plenty of times. Glessner, he is more than a fine guy to slide in and take over for Barmira. And then another late commit. You have one Trent Middleton, a long snapper who is a 5-star long snapper. No, you're not going to go on 24/7 Sports Rivals and see 5-star long snapper, but the Rubio long snapping, they have their own composite rankings of long snapping. And you might say, Zach, why do you care about long snapping? Well, Jack Landry IV was rated as one of the top long snappers in the country. He declared for the draft. So the Bruins have to truly figure out how to replace that. Funny enough, you look on the other side against USC. Again, there's the joke that does Lincoln Riley even care about defense or special teams? His team is one of the worst kickoff return units in the country. And like UCLA, SC also lost their game against Tulane because of a muffed kickoff that set the back in the 1. They got a safety, and Tulane went down, go Green Wave, and knocked off USC late in that one, just like how the Bruins failed. Gave up the lead, go-ahead score against one. Pitt, and then find a way against special teams. But you can see Chip Kelly cares a little bit more about special teams, getting a highly ranked long snapper in the long snapping units, a 5-star. Looked at his GPA, looks like it's a 4.0, if not a 4.2. And this is the guy UCLA needs to be a good long snapper. Why am I wasting time about long snapping? Well, I'm not, because Blake Glessner, Montana State kicker, transfer now to UCLA, played in a game against 2 top 5 teams, if not top 10 teams in the country at the FCS level. Montana State beat Weber by about 5 points. Weber State's long snapper snapped 4 snaps through the back of the end zone for 4 safeties. Is this something that's already been talked about? But if you forgot or for some reason didn't hear it, Blake Lester played in a team where his opposition, the long snapper, which is one of the 3 key components in the kicking game, snapped it to the back of the end zone four safeties, of course, that accounts for 8 points, and the ball for Montana State beat Weber because they snapped it through the back of the end zone. So you can't tell me long snapping does not matter when you have a Blake Glessner who is was a third team All Big Sky guy. You have Middleton who will be a true freshman coming into 23, should win the job, and Chris Rubio has his own composite long snapping rankings. You can go look it up. Just look at the Rubio long snapping, and it has what each star means. 5-star, ready to go, very solid. 4.5 stars, pretty solid, and then it goes down from there from each level technically. And this is a guy who's amongst the top 20 long snappers in the country. UCLA had an opening with Landry the fourth heading out, and this is where they fill it in. So running back room getting stacked, filling in little roles in the special teams, getting a punter, getting a kicker, getting a long snapper, and now UCLA building their team from within, as UCLA is going to have quite the battles, and maybe not so many in other positions, with the Chip Kelly recruiting. We should be excited. 2023 is, just around the corner. You might not think it in January, but it's just around the corner. Coming up, we've got UCLA basketball. They're red hot. Mick Cronin gives us some good quotes in his media availability that was posted on socials. And then, of course, beat SC always. Beat SC. Let's go. We'll talk about that after we tell you a little bit about BetOnline. BetOnline is your number one source for all your sports betting needs. If you want your betting fix, they've got easy resources for scores. They've got betting fixes when it comes to podcasts. They've got it all with betonline.net. All you have to do is use your mobile device or go to the website and check out more. They've got everything from basketball, pro football. You've got bowl season, which is wrapping up the CFP National Championship game, which is set. They've got it all. They got you your lines. And just know, BetOnline is your number one source. So BetOnline, just know that's where the game starts. Where the game starts. Moving on here in Locked On UCLA, Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer just talked a little bit about football. Moving into basketball now, which I spent this most of last show talking about UCLA hoops, how they're riding high, coming off those wins in Washington against the Cougs and then against the Huskies. The Bruins have won 10 in a row, red hot against their bitter rival USC, who has given UCLA some trouble heading into another matchup in the Mick Cronin era against Andy Enfield, who's now been there for 10 seasons for USC. And this is a matchup which is a very big time. This is potentially, even though there is a sold-out crowd, yes, UCLA posted it's supposed to be a sellout in Pauley Pavilion, even though they're still in winter break, although I think they come a couple of days after. So good show out by the students. Pauley should pack it out with UCLA top 10 team once again against an SC team who just lost by 10 at Wazoo, where UCLA struggled again as well, and they barely snuck out of there with a win. So for SC, currently they're on a first four out if you look at it when it comes to NCAA tournament possibilities. They're 11-4. They had a 7-game winning streak snapped with their loss to the Cougars. Pretty comfortable win against Washington on the road, and their biggest result was a win at home against Auburn in come from behind fashion. Took Tennessee to overtime in a neutral court, barely lost to Wisconsin. But again, the headlines was opening night, they lost to Andy Enfield's old job, losing at home to Florida Gulf Coast, and they already only beat Vermont, the Catamounts, by 2 at home. So this is a team that's kind of up and down, but a program under Andy Enfield until the most two recent meetings against the Bruins in Pauley and then in Vegas, where they've had Mick Cronin's numbers with some very good teams, mind you, for SC. As Mick Cronin discussed in his own quotes, it's a rivalry, a lot of respect, no hatred, but he has respect for Enfield's program and a team who has more wins than UCLA in the last 8 seasons, last 4 seasons. So this is a game that is a recipe for disaster when it comes to recent history for the Bruins. And with a desperate team like SC, with Amari Bailey, who's already been marked as out for the UCLA Bruins against the Trojans, it's a recipe for success possibly for SC because they need this win. You get a win on the road against UCLA, who hasn't lost at home so far this year, although you look at the competition. SC needs this win. It's an automatic resume booster. They beat UCLA on the road. That goes from maybe last 4 out or first 4 out into not only last 4 in, but maybe next 4 in when it comes to building to the tournament. So the Bruins cannot take them lightly in a home rocking environment where you have one of your starters out again, although Singleton can fill in nicely, but it's going to come up to an Abramo Zonka, Dylan Andrews, a Will McClendon, who Mick Cronin mentioned by name as guys that need to step up, as when you have a starter out or a key significant contributor out, that can ruin the gelling of your rotation and how you play with what guys and what minutes, depending on what USC brings. Well, there's some key stats in numbers that we're going to talk about right now. So for USC, it might come down to a couple of things that are cut and dry as to what UCLA needs to do for a win, considering, yes, 3 days off since their last game on a Sunday, but then they don't have a game for a week, although those are at home against Utah and Colorado. So this is one of those games that's going to sit and simmer for a little bit, win or lose at home with a rocking environment. So for UCLA, these are key things. Against a 3-1 team, the Pac-12, 11-4, the Bruins, they've won 10 in a row, 13-2, 4-0 in Pac-12 play. SC, they're one of the better defensive-minded teams in the country. Maybe not on UCLA's level, but they hold teams generally to under 40% from the field. That's a top 20 mark, close to it across the country. Although they're kind of Jekyll and Hyde from three. They've had about 4 games where they've hit 9 or more threes, and then they've had 4 more games based on their game notes when it comes to three-point shooting where they're completely horrid when they can't even make a single shot from three. So this is a team UCLA has to watch out for. SC will be hot and ready, and if they get streaky, it could be a long night for the Bruins. Some more numbers and notes and players to look out for. Of course, Drew Peterson already made his name known against the Bruins faithful when he went and against UCLA in the first matchup in 2022, had 27 points, 12 rebounds, 5 blocks, and 4 assists in a dominant fashion. So Drew Peterson, who's second on the team in scoring, 14 points per game, that's a guy the Bruins have to look out for as someone who's already amongst one of the better players in the Pac-12 when it comes to sharing the basketball, setting his teammates up. He might take it over himself like he did last year in an SC win, where you don't want that to happen again. That's a guy who could take over a matchup. And with UCLA missing a starter, and if they go cold, this is a guy like Peterson who can get red hot. A guy who is hot going in, Boogie Ellis. Boogie Ellis in his last 4 games for SC, 21.5 points per game in his last 4, leads the team in three-point shooting when it comes to most three-pointers made. And for a streaky team like SC when it comes to shooting the three, if Peterson's dishing it out, and then you have Ellis hitting threes and continuing his scoring touch, this could be a recipe for disaster if UCLA does not show up to play. Now, all right, one last key moment. Josh Morgan, the Long Beach State transfer, has been with SC the last couple of seasons, a big-time shot blocker, 42 block shots. So when it comes to presence in the paint for UCLA, even though Bona had a good week last week, Pac-12 Freshman of the Year, I remember even one of you guys in the comments mentioning Bona maybe isn't the best rebounder. Well, USC's got that post-paint presence with Josh Morgan, 42 blocks. That's third, if not tied for third, in the country. If UCLA doesn't establish a post presence and they don't get those easy buckets, while Singleton is almost automatic from three, it seems like, you want to be able to get those easy buckets. So for UCLA to do that, it's find a way to neutralize Josh Morgan, or maybe if Bona's really clicked it on and figured out his freshman woes, or kind of that little, all right, how am I doing it here or there? UCLA, they can feed it to Bona, get easy buckets in the paint, then maybe make Morgan a non-factor for someone who can alter shots, block shots, and make the Bruins miss shots in the paint for a team that you look at Ken Palm for UCLA, one of the more efficient offenses, in addition to their defenses in the country with Mick Cronin at the helm. So the Bruins want to make sure they don't get caught up with Josh Morgan. You don't let Peterson take over the game, and you don't want Ellis to continue his hot stretch and get hot from downtown, because you never know. If SC gets hot, runs away with it, with an Amari Bailey out, might be tough to do for an SC team who this year, in games that start before 7 o'clock, they're 1-3. Useless stat, I know, but here's a more fun fact. SC this season, 11-4, they're 7-1 when scoring 70 or more points in a game. 6-0 when they've reached 80 or more points in the game. UCLA's only games this season they've lost when they're 13-2 is when they've allowed 70 points or more to Illinois and to Baylor. Has that happened since? No. Teams have barely reached the 50-point mark, 60 points in certain occasions. So the only 2 times the Bruins have allowed 70 or more is those 2 losses. Again, UCLA also especially excellent when it comes to forcing turnovers. The Bruins, when Tiger Campbell, who can take care of the basketball, as Mick Cronin was quoted on saying, it's pretty surprising when you see David Singleton miss a shot one and seeing Tiger Campbell turn over the basketball. So we'll have more on a Mick Cronin quote in a moment. For USC, this is what they've got. When they turn it over, when they have less turnovers than their opponent, they are 6-0. So when they don't turn it over, they are pretty tough to beat. So when they have turnovers, if they have more turnovers than their opponent, which they generally do, a team that averages 14 turnovers a game, they actually turn it over more often than they force turnovers, at least so far. 14 turnovers for them, 13 turnovers forced. UCLA, again, numbers already speak for themselves. Mick Cronin harps on not turning over the basketball. It might be won and lost. One, if USC turns over the basketball and UCLA scores and goes in transition, gets easy buckets, and then again, if Morgan can't get down the floor and defend, the Bruins can get those easy buckets. Again, this will be a little different without Amari Bailey in the lineup. That Singleton has a good chance to earn even more minutes for himself. And then two, even if SC's turning over the basketball, if they're red hot from downtown and they're scoring in the 70s, we haven't seen what UCLA's like in a close game in the 70s, where it's a higher scoring game. Both teams are making shots. We haven't seen that yet so far for the 2022 to 23 Bruins, which is something I think we'd like to see. A close, high scoring game, which sometimes in a tournament scenario or even in a conference play scenario, you get those hot games where someone's going to score 25. If not two players score 25 or more and get red hot downtown. What was that Big 12 game the other day? You had what? K-State and Texas both score over 100 in regulation in an absurd total, and K-State put up like 115 or something absurd, and Texas put up 103. That's not what I'm saying, and that's not what's going to happen between two pretty solid defenses. But if one team hits 72 to 70, which could be high scoring for the way these two teams can get after it defensively, especially UCLA, and especially the way SC can alter shots and force poor shooting options. So maybe in this game, if SC scores up to 70, that will win them this game. Even if it's to 70 alone, that is what's been the crux of the UCLA defensive struggles so far this season. So if the Bruins can keep SC to under 70, continue to force turnovers, and not let the Trojans get a streaky stretch where they hit threes, then the Bruins should be well and good to win this game. But again, no Amari Bailey, Singleton in the starting lineup, which shortens the rotation and will shrink even more if the game is close down the stretch, because Mick Cronin hasn't really won this game against Andy Enfield in these previous 3 seasons before this one. Heading into beginning of COVID, now kind of maybe in this now 22-23 season. USC, it's not the same team like last season or recently where they got off to the hard start, 13-0. But the Bruins need this win. They don't need it as desperately as SC does, but to become that 1-2 seed in the 1 seed in the West, keep the 2 seed in the Midwest to have those first and second round games in the West Coast in Sacramento, UCLA needs to win this game, especially with desperate teams coming up. SC, Colorado, Utah, Arizona State, all before the Arizona game. Those are teams who are on the outside looking into tournament scenario where if they beat UCLA, they will be in the tournament, or at least that'll help their quad one wins by playing at UCLA and maybe knocking them off. And that could hurt UCLA when it comes to building a complete resume. Again, Mick Cronin, this is what he said. Offense can be really simple when you're playing 5-on-5, when you have 5 guys who can score. Really good player doesn't turn over the ball unless they're being lazy or making bad decisions. But when you have the ball, you have to be responsible. You're responsible for the whole team. So, it's important UCLA with Singleton maybe in that starting lineup with the likes of Bailey struggling as of late. Not sure if it was related to the injury or not. You could argue UCLA might have more 5-on-5 scoring to counterbalance maybe an SC team if they get hot. But the bench may be another key here for UCLA and for SC to try and maybe sneak their way back into a game where they're not going to be favored in Pauley Pavilion. So for Mick Cronin, talks about turnovers, and one of the final quotes he mentioned about Amari Bailey, not too sure when he'll be back. It won't be for this game, but it shouldn't affect his career moving forward. And while he doesn't know everything, as he said he was semi-intelligent, maybe might admit that he will miss the SC game, maybe one or two in next week or not. We'll see. I'm not entirely sure about those. But either way, UCLA, this is not exactly a resume building win, but it's one to energize the fan base. You have the students there all coming back from early winter break, or at least the fans there. You win this game, a Pac-12 game, which could arguably be said as a Pac-12 home opener, despite the Bruins already having it against Oregon with the fans there. This could set everybody up for coming to a lot of games throughout January, February, and into March when you play Arizona at home. Get everybody energized for SC. They need this game. You win this game, and they move forward, and they are suddenly in the NCAA tournament with a win like this. Got to have it for SC. The Bruins don't need to have it, but they want to build a resume and maintain the resume, especially with Kentucky and Maryland slipping, even Illinois slipping a little bit. The Bruins would like to have this win, especially at home. It's not like it's at SC where they're going crazy and it's a packed out house. This is at home. Defend your court, defend Pauley Pavilion, and let's get it rocking. It's a blue out. I know I'm wearing white, but it's get a blue out time. Go Bruins, beat SC. As remember, thanks for making Locked On UCLA your first listen each and every day. It's free wherever you get your podcasts. I know I'm on the road. These podcasts coming out a little later in the evening. We'll get it better. Go Bruins. Happy New Year once again. This has been Locked On UCLA. Get your hands in the air, Bruins fans. 8 clap time. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. UCLA. UCLA beat SC. Let's go. Knock them out. Beat them down. Beat them by 25. Knock them bums out of the tournament and keep it like that. Go Bruins. This has been Locked On UCLA. Let's do it.